we hear the 0 F's given, right? I don't care about what other people think, and I'm just going to do my thing and, do you and all that stuff. And that's all essentially true to some degree, but the way to get to the point where you actually do your purpose and your life is not through not caring what other people think. That's not the bridge that gets you there.
Hi, Sean. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Rima. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited that you're here. I'm going to start right off asking you something that's on my heart. I see so many individuals these days that are starving for recognition, starving to be seen, to be heard. You've been coaching for a lot of years, a lot of women. You've done tons and tons of videos and teaching, been on stages. I would love to understand from your perspective of having coached one-on-one and been with so many individuals, what's your take on that need, that starvation for recognition?
We're getting deep right out of the gate. I love
Yes.
it. The need for recognition, I think it's deeper than recognition. So first of all, I think we all have a need for recognition. And if we don't have that need fulfilled, then we're going to try to get it from wherever we can. And if our inner circle of people, support groups, whatever we've surrounded ourselves with, if they're not giving us this recognition to the point where we feel it inside, then we're going to go out further and further to try to get it, right? And so what I think we see a lot in today's world, especially in the online world of social media is one of the ways that we can get an immediate injection of recognition. We put out a post and people will heart it. There's a reason that Facebook allows you to like or heart posts, because they know through all their research, like that's what humans are actually looking for. So that's not an accident. They operate, and many social media platforms operate on what they know humans actually want and crave. So the idea that I can put a post out and get an experience of recognition is immediate nowadays. And that's new in the human, like literally in the experience of our human species. That we've only had that for a couple decades now, right? Where we can actually put something out there and get immediate response. I remember that being so fascinating. Like I can put up a website and immediately I can see the changes on the site and people can engage with it right away. There was something really compelling. I remember like back in 2005 is when I first started putting up websites and getting, my content out there. And I remember there was something so cool and so intriguing and so liberating about the idea that I could do something on this side of my computer and somebody on the other side of the world could see it, like virtually immediately, right? I thought it was so cool. Today, like that's just, Tuesday morning, right? Like, I mean, that's what social media has become. So this idea of immediacy inside of recognition, I think is new, but the craving for recognition is not new. And it's just a human desire. And it goes deeper. I want to get to that point, but I think the problem with that craving of recognition is that we are seeking recognition from external sources. So we need somebody else to say, I recognize you and I support you, or I celebrate you, or I acknowledge you, or I whatever, right? I love you. I like you. We're looking for an external source to recognize us. And if we haven't internally recognized us, then all the external recognition is not going to be all that powerful. It'll still, help. And like, so one of the big issues, I know I'm kind of immediately changing the conversation here, but so the way my mind works is,
That was going to be my next question, actually. So good.
Okay, perfect. So one of the big issues to deal with this is this like mission that so many people are on to not care what other people think, right? So, we hear the 0 F's given, right? I don't care about what other people think, and I'm just going to do my thing and, do you and all that stuff. And that's all essentially true to some degree, but the way to get to the point where you actually do your purpose and your life is not through not caring what other people think. That's not the bridge that gets you there. So there isn't a way, I don't believe, for a human being to not care what other people think, because it's a deep, deep rooted desire. Unless somebody is, and I mean this in all literal sense of the term, a sociopath. Sociopathic people are ones that literally don't care what other people think. And psychopathic people, that's kind of, in that same neighborhood. I'm not going to try to get into all that, but my point is, what a lot of people think is the answer is not the answer. The answer is not to not care what other people think. The answer is to not need what other people think. So you're always going to enjoy and like external recognition, but you can get to the point where you don't need external recognition to keep going. But that's only going to be if you have it internally, because I do think recognition is a requirement. But the depth of this, if we go a little bit deeper than this, it's not just recognition. Because if you think about what recognition is, it's to say that I recognize you, I see you. But something has to exist before it is seen. So if we go a little bit deeper, what external recognition gives us is a sense of validation. And those are not the same thing. Validation is what we're actually after. Validation is a deep, deep need for humans. And if you think about that word, if we break that down and look at the literal definition and meaning of that word, it means you are valid. It means like you're important, you're significant, you exist. And if I don't have, like if the box of validation is unchecked internally, and then I go out and get it, try to get it externally, any form of external recognition is not going to check the internal box of validation. And that's why we get so stuck in all of our patterns, and we go chase the things that, number one, are kind of hard to get, but number two, even if we get it, it doesn't check the internal box of validation. So I think we need and want recognition, but that's just icing on the cake. What we actually need is validation. And you can have internal validation and not get any external recognition. I mean, there are people out there that aren't on social media. There are people out there that don't throw their lives out there for people to go, yay, good job, you. And they are internally validated. They live their lives the way they want to live their lives, and they're good. And then the opposite is true. There are a lot of people that have nonstop external recognition, but they don't have internal validation. And those people we quite often see are depressed, or, unfortunately, they'll commit suicide, or they'll, develop like really damaging behaviors, either internally or externally damaging to themselves and to other people around. And that's because the recognition is there, but the validation isn't. And so we need to understand that these two things are different. Now, when you have validation and recognition on top of it, then that's the best of all worlds. But recognition does not lead to validation. I think that's the critical distinction that we need to make. And how you get validation is not the same as how you get recognition. I don't
Thank you
think I've
for
ever
clarifying.
broken those two down with those two exact words like this. So I appreciate the question.
Thank you for actually breaking it down that way, because we do see a lot of posts of people that we love that all of a sudden you hear they've committed suicide or have done something that
Yeah.
have hurt them. And that this specific point that you're addressing is the validation, the internal validation versus the external is so big. Now,
Yeah.
you yourself have been on an incredible journey since you started your career. I've been privileged to be in one of your events back in 2014 and saw you back then. And now I'm in one of your programs now. And I go, wow, I thought you were amazing back then. And now I see you even thousands of folds ahead in
Oh.
how you show up. I would love for you to take people a little bit down that journey of your career and how you become this, because there are so many that think the external validation is where it's at.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I knew that you were in that program way back when, and that's a long time. That's 8 years between then and now. And it's easy for me to not recognize the distance between those two data points, right? Those two experiences for you. So number one, it's really cool to hear you share that, and I appreciate that a lot. And you asking the question then causes me to reflect on what were some of those elements, some of those little milestones in between, and two of them immediately come out. The first one is my own willingness to look myself straight in the mirror. And I had been doing that to some degree for a long time. I started this whole work back at the end of 2005. And so I've been in this space of coaching and personal development for nearly 2 decades now. So I've been doing it for, over the course of all of that time, but I was really drawn in, I'd say 2016, with an invitation to go really, really deep and really, really vulnerable. And who am I at the core? Two of the events that led to that, they were several years earlier, were the deaths of both of my parents. They died within a year, just over a year apart. And so that caused me to think about life in different ways. Each one of their deaths affected me differently. As I think you know this, that with my dad's death, I was really open and public with it, and I created signature talks from it. And with my mom's death, it was the exact opposite. I didn't tell anybody about it. Like, very close friends of mine didn't know that she died. I found out not too long ago, like within the last year, that some of my friends didn't know she had died. Like people I grew up with, right? They didn't know. But they knew a bunch of other stuff, right? So I was sharing a lot of things, but I was very, very private with that because there was so much shame around who I was in my relationship with her. And so that was a really powerful invitation for me to look at that shame and go eye to eye with my shadows and with my pain and all the things that I never wanted to look at before or didn't know existed. And I can look back now and realize that part of what caused me to do that, or at least caused my willingness to do that, is how much pain and disruption was going on in my life at that time. In 2015, 16, 17, 18, my business was going up and down. I had some extreme lows. I had like a lot of disruption that caused me to have to look at myself in the face. And I think, those difficult moments, those difficult experiences that we all have as humans are invitations to go deeper and to look internally. We really don't have a whole lot of reason to look internally when everything is going well, right? We got a lot of money coming in. We got all the things happening. Everybody is a celebration. Like, why would we want to look inward when everything is going well? But it's when the things aren't going well that we have an invitation to check in and see why aren't they going well, or maybe they are going better and we're not receiving it. We're not experiencing the gratitude behind it, or maybe we're just really off course and we're really misaligned. I wouldn't say I was misaligned in terms of the things that I was doing, but I had a depth of relationship to myself that I was being invited into. And so over the course of several years, I started to do some much, much deeper work around my own pain and my own identities and my beliefs and, who I am as a person. And I got to know myself at a whole nother level. Now I can look back and go, oh my goodness, like, had the universe not operated in my favor in that way, from the filters that I can now look back on, I might not have ever done that. I might not have ever, like, all the things that I was wishing were happening back then. If all of those things would have happened, then I might not have ever looked myself in the mirror. And had that not happened, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation, because so much of what's happened since then is based on all of that. Right. And so one of the things that I did, and I don't necessarily suggest this for everybody because it's not something that everybody's going to want to do, but I actually did a one-man show on my relationship with my mother. So not only did I start talking about this situation in my life that I was totally private for, I think the first time that I told anybody, and I'm including my wife and kids, about the stories with my mom was at least 4 years after she died. That was the first time I started to tell some of the stories. And eventually I started to tell a little bit more, and I, went inside and, just kept learning and questioning and curiosity and all that stuff. And fast forward to a couple years after I started that, then I created this one-man show, and it was on public display, this relationship that I had with my mom. Not only did I tell a lot of the stories, but I had to act the stories because I was doing it on stage. And so I had to become the earlier versions of myself that I didn't want anybody to know. I actually did not want to invite my children because I didn't want them to know that their dad used to be this monster, because I was horrible to my mom. So I didn't want to admit how mean I was to her. And it's their grandmother. I didn't want them to know that daddy had this in him. And I think on some level, Rima, I was probably scared that I still do. Like, I didn't want to let anything out of the cage that, might start running around wild or something. But I committed to it. And not only did I play those deeper versions of myself, but because it's a one-man show and I'm telling the full story, I then had to play my mom also. And the idea of being the bully and the victim at the same time is breathtaking, but it was my own. I was playing both parts, and like, I became my own victim. So when I played through my mom's role, the victim of my bullying, that was something I wasn't prepared for. Because, like, I don't know how often we get to taste our own poison, right? Like, actually feel the effects of some of our actions. And in this case, some actions that I had a lot of shame around. So it was emotionally the most difficult thing I had to do, because it touched all of this, all the shadows that I wished I didn't have. But at the same time, it was the most liberating thing I've ever done, because I touched all the shadows that I wished I didn't have. And not only did I touch them, but I made use of them. In this case, I turned it into a creation. I turned it into a play. I've since written a song about it, and it's become like a teaching mechanism for me Now, not everybody needs to do that, but that was the most profoundly shifting experience of my career and of my life in this whole personal development world and evolution. And then the other thing is, once I told the story for the first time, then it was just a story, and then I didn't have to hide behind it. Like, this is who I was. And the more that I could just take all the defense mechanisms down and just go, daughter, son, this is who your daddy was. Like, I mean, I could feel, the just the emotions getting activated in my body as I say that right now. But that by itself is just so liberating. And just go, who I was isn't who I am. And who I am is because of who I was. So denying who I was won't allow me to validate who I am. Going back to the validation recognition discussion. So that was a really profound moment in my life. And it was the first time that I ever created anything creative. And what I mean by creative is like poetic or with a story. Like, I've created a bunch of stuff. I created a lot of content. I've created a lot of how-to. I've created, audio programs and online programs, all that stuff. So I've created content, but that show was the first time that I created creatively. And I had never written a poem, maybe up until like maybe back in school or something, we had to write a haiku poem or something like that. But I never wrote a poem in my own time. I never even thought about like entertaining kind of creativity until that show. And as soon as I wrote that whole one-man show, it's like these floodgates of creativity just completely opened up for me. And then I started writing poems. And the first poem that I wrote was like a 13-minute poem, right? So I didn't jump out of the gate and write like a half a page poem. I just took all this stuff that I've been holding onto and just like vomited out this 13-minute poem. And since then I've written, I don't know how many poems, but it's just changed the way that I think and changed the way that I learn and changed the way that I teach. Like it opened up something in me that was dormant for a long, long time. So that's I said there were two things. That's the longer explanation. Actually, that's the shorter explanation of the first thing. The second thing happened maybe a year or two after that, where I recognized that I had all of these thoughts and messages that I wasn't sharing, specifically in the realm of personal development and coaching. So at the time, I'd been in the industry for like 10 years, and I had all these thoughts about why people really struggle and what we really need and what I think is wrong, and how a lot of the coaching industry operates like a pyramid scheme, and it's not really helping a lot of people, but people are just paying for the same thing and then selling what they bought. And like, it just felt bad. But at the time, I wasn't saying it. And the reason I wasn't saying it, now I can look back, is I recognize I didn't have a whole lot of certainty in that message. And in 2017 or 18, I decided to speak what I was thinking simply because I was thinking it. And that decision has transformed everything literally over the last 4 years of my world, because what I was afraid of is me speaking out about the coaching industry or me speaking out about people that I think aren't doing things above board. And, I wanted to like say, hey, you got to understand there's some realities in this business and most people are not telling you about them. And, I just wanted to, I didn't want to be like a whistleblower in the sense of, saying any names or anything like that. But I just really wanted to tell people, if you want to get into this industry, you have to understand what you're actually getting into. And the majority of people are not telling you the truth. So I just want you to get the truth, right? And so back then I started a podcast called The Truth About Coaching. And I just kind of slowly gave myself permission to start speaking. And truly early on, I would say something and then brace for impact. I'd say something and then be afraid, because what I was always afraid of is people that were already established in the industry basically come squash me. Like me say something like, hey, you guys don't know that when people do these big old launches, sometimes there's as much as a 50% refund request on all of those sales. So yeah, they're telling you about the $2 million of sales that they made. They're not telling you about the $1 million of refunds. I know about them because we talk behind the scenes, but they don't tell you about those things, right? So that's like an example. And immediately in my head, I was afraid of some of those, $2 million launch coaches like coming after me and going, well, who are you? You're just a little fish. And, then saying whatever diminishing things they could say to me. Right. So I was afraid to be heard because I was afraid of those repercussions. But eventually, and I hope this is something that will land with everybody that listens to this, eventually the cost of staying silent was greater than the cost of speaking up. I think I've never said those words before. The cost of staying silent finally became greater than the cost of speaking up. And it was at that time that I committed, specifically from a strategic standpoint, to put out a bunch of videos on YouTube and to get consistent on YouTube. So I was sharing a lot of these thoughts. I've got at least one, if not 2 or 3 videos that say like the coaching industry is a pyramid. And I like speak to that, right? And then a bunch of other videos that are just kind of like the truth. And it's not all negative. I mean, the truth is you can make a ton of money and you can make huge impact in this industry. So that's also true. But there are other things that aren't being shared, or other things that we misunderstand, or illusions. Like those are all the truths. So let's just talk about the good and the bad and the ugly and the messy and all of it at the same time. And so that's when I started to find my voice in the coaching industry specifically. And I started giving myself permission to share anything that I had to share. And this is not an easy thing for a lot of us to do. It took me a long time. So I don't want anybody to hear this and go, oh, okay, I'm just going to go flip that switch on that Sean talked about. Because it's not a flip of a switch, but you got to at least start, right? And even though I started, I would still pull back, and I didn't stay consistent on YouTube for a while. And I would do things, and then I would get, because the other thing is with YouTube specifically, but anything in today's world, if you get visible, you will have attackers. And there are just people out there, the trolling industry is like, it's its own legitimate industry now. Like there are people who find meaning in their lives by trolling everybody else. That's like how they, I don't know. It's like, that's how they get gas. Like that's how they get their nourishment or something. Let me tear down everybody else. And a lot of times those accounts aren't even real. I've heard that as many as a third of the online accounts are not real. So there are people hiding behind fake avatars or fake egos or whatever, so they can, feel powerful or say the things they wouldn't otherwise say if their name was attached to it, all that stuff. So there were times when I would say things, I would put videos out, the videos would get, some traction, and then somebody would make an attack. And then I would have to process that and kind of get over that level. And then I would recommit to doing more videos and being more vocal and being more outspoken. Then I would get an attack. And then I would hold, then I would, like lick my wounds and process and talk to my coach and therapist. And they're like, okay, get me back in the ring now. And then I go again, right? It's a potentially exhausting process of, I mean, truly, like, as much as I don't want to use, analogies that just seem like violent or really difficult, it is like getting in the ring and then getting knocked out of the ring and then doing whatever you can to get back up and walk those steps up to the ring again, and then get back in and get knocked out and then get back in and then get knocked out and get back in. And of course, the getting knocked out isn't a story that's usually told. So most of us don't see when other people are getting knocked out. We only see what they're doing in the ring. And so then when we get knocked out, we think, oh, well, we shouldn't have been knocked out, or we're not strong enough, or, we're doing it wrong. If I could just have that, whatever that muscle is, or the skill, or the not caring about what other people think, then I wouldn't get knocked out of the ring. And the truth is, you have to get knocked out of the ring. You absolutely have to. It's a requirement of the process. There's a requirement that calls for you to figure out what you need to think about to go from flat on your back to getting up on your knees, to getting up on your feet, to taking the first step on the first stair of that walk back up into the ring, and then thinking that you got it and then get knocked on your back again. That is a requirement of the process. And so many people just don't believe that, right? So I am now so much more vocal, as you know, that that's the process that we need to learn. And the reason I'm more vocal about that is because I made the promise to myself to be, to speak. And that's because of the work that I did a couple years prior. So I want to give one quick analogy that seems to land for so many people. When I decided that I need to make this commitment, the analogy that really landed for me is that of a lighthouse. And I recognized that I had this message inside me that most people don't know about. And I remember, like, I would get so angry at the other people who were succeeding in the industry and doing things in a way that I thought were out of integrity, or they were, doing bad things or whatever. Like, that's all my judgment, right? I was sitting on my high horse and judging all these people, but then I recognized, but I wasn't speaking. So all the people that were joining all these other programs and jumping in line with all these other folks, they didn't have an opportunity to join mine because they didn't know about mine. And I just remember having this thought that I need to put myself on the menu. So if I'm going to get frustrated that everybody keeps choosing all these other people, that's only valid if I'm also on the menu to be chosen. So until I'm on the menu to be chosen, then what good is it for me to get irritated that nobody's choosing me? Right? Because it doesn't make sense. Like, they got to know that you're an option, right? So then I started thinking about this lighthouse analogy and recognizing that the lighthouse shines its light because it's a lighthouse. It doesn't only shine its light when the boats are present. It doesn't only shine its light to the boats that it can see. And it doesn't only shine its light in certain weather. It doesn't only shine its light when it's stormy. It shines its light because it's a lighthouse, because that's what it does. And what if I just shined my light and then trusted that the boats that need to see my light will see it, even when I don't see them? And so over the course of the last 4 years, that's what has been happening in my business, that almost everybody that's in our business now, Rima, has come from the last 4 years of YouTube. They saw me on YouTube and they watched, the shortest video on YouTube is an hour, right? Not literally, but not too far from the truth. I used to do a lot of 15, 20-minute videos, but now I just do a lot of longer videos. But the point is, they started to show up, but that was because I just kept speaking and I kept putting out products and I kept putting out videos. Specifically, we jumped into social media and we just did a lot of stuff, but that has become like the rally cry for me internally. But it's what I want to teach everybody who wants to do anything that's, related to the coaching or training or speaking or author industry. Like, your light has to shine before you see the boats. And when you shine the light a few times, You give a couple pulses, you put a couple posts out there, you put a couple videos out there, and you don't immediately see the boats showing up to the harbor, that's because they're probably so far out that they need more light to find their way to you. And that has become like this internal rally cry for me. It's become something that we teach our communities, as you know, that if you have a light, shine it. Don't only shine it if people are asking you for it. And don't only shine it if people immediately respond to it. Because what I want at the end of my life is to have no light left. I don't want any potential left. I don't want any messages left inside me at the end of my life when I look back. So I just try to, as much as I can, expel everything that's inside of me. If I have something to say it. Not so much because somebody needs to like it, but because what good is it in my head?
Sean, I so appreciate you so much. As a male specifically that's willing to go within, face the shadows, and then talk about them. Not that it's easy. I caught your podcast where you shared your truth about your life, and I cried through it. But I cried more than anything for seeing you as this role model, not only for your kids, for the community of women that you work with, but for other males to go, how do we cure all the challenges we continue to have because we're not willing to go within, we're not willing to go, I felt shameful of this. And you face those things. So I'm very appreciative that you put that out there, that you do long videos and you teach authentically. And that's what drew me to you again, to go, this is the world I'd love to see. How else are we going to begin to actually make this world a better place if we keep doing the same thing we've been doing forever and ever and ever? I would
And look at you. Now I'm on your podcast and you're shining your light. So I'm so proud of you for not just thinking about that, but putting it in motion.
Thank
and
you.
now you have a product, you have a voice, you have a mission, you have a brand, and like, I mean, you are a lighthouse, and there are going to be plenty of boats that are only drawn to your light and not mine. And so we need more lighthouses. We need more lighthouses to shine their lights. And I'm just so happy that yours is on.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'd love to touch on the success model. And I wrote something down. Let's see. True success as a human. Because we talked about the industry that we're in, the coaching industry, but there's lots of industry where they have a facade of what success is really like. When, how do you deal with the human success? Not just the success of whatever people think, oh, they're successful because they look good, they have followers, they have this. Like,
yeah,
I'd love for you to delve into that, because I know we talk about it in various formats through the programs, but for people to really hear, how do they look at themselves even better? How do they judge their own success?
Well, now you're taking me into the current stage of my life, which is what I love to open up. So first of all, I'd love to can I share a resource for people based on the masculinity conversation?
Please do.
Because I do think it's important for us to look at the things that we're ashamed of and to know ourselves and all the things that you just talked about, specifically for men, although it's not as much gender men, it's more energy of masculinity. And there's a lot of women doing the exact same thing, but it's the masculine energy.
Thank you for clarifying.
That doesn't want us to be weak or vulnerable or, make mistakes and all that sort of stuff. So that's the insecure masculine that we all have. And there's programming that applies to men from a gender standpoint that doesn't necessarily apply to women in the same ways. That's the social programming. And so I have over the years, as I just started, talking and writing these poems, stuff like that, gotten a lot more passionate about, we'll call it men's work, right? It's really masculinity work. And so there is a website or a page on my website for masculinity, and it's called masculinity. It's coachseansmith.com/masculinity. And it has a collection of my TED talk that I did, which is a poem on the power of vulnerable masculinity. It has that first poem that I ever wrote. I think it's the second one on that page, called Toxic Masculinity. And it's a poem that I wrote to my son, just diving into what masculinity actually is. It's, deeply meaningful to me. When I first published that poem and told people about it on Facebook, I remember where I was. I was in this studio right now on the other side, looking out that window. And as soon as I hit publish, I just started bawling. I just started crying. And I canceled the rest of my day because I just wanted to be with this feeling of like sacred vulnerability. I mean, it was the first time that I'd shared plenty of videos and all kinds of stuff, but not anything like this. There was just something really personal about it that was so disruptive. But on that page, /masculinity page that I just gave, there's several videos, there's articles, there's some Facebook posts. It's just a collection of a lot of the work that I've done around masculinity in general. And what does that look like, for men and women? But some of it is speaking directly to, people that identify with the gender male, right? Because there are distinctions that I think are really important. Oh, back to your question. How did you phrase it again? Because I think it was really important the way you phrased it. Do you remember?
It's about success and how people
Human success.
Yes. Thank you.
That's it. That was the phrase that I was trying to get back to. And as you were leading up to the question, that's the word that was in my mind too. Like this is about human. I mean, every market that we're in is a human market. And so the human success, I believe we are programmed in society to care about all those things that you mentioned, care about the vanity numbers, how many followers you have on social media, how many external data points of recognition and validation and enoughness and approval and acceptance and all that stuff that these numbers whittle down into. But the majority of that external validation is an illusion. It's, it's nice to have money. It's nice to have the status. It's nice to have all that stuff, but it still can't check that internal box of validation. I've been hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt before. And I've had, it doesn't matter that I have a number, but I've had maybe as much as $200,000 in cash in my bank account before. And neither one of those determined my value as a person. When I was so far in debt and literally had no money, there's a point in my life where I was trying to buy Carl's Jr. and all of my credit cards, I had 18 at the time. Well, they didn't all get declined because after the first 6 got declined, I stopped trying because those were my best 6. And once my best 6 got declined, I knew the other 12 were going to get declined. So there was a point in my life where I couldn't buy Carl's Jr. And at that time, I believed that if I had a lot of money in my bank account, then I would feel good about myself. Because right now I don't, and I don't, right? I don't have any money in my bank account and I feel terrible about myself. So I think if one goes up, then the other should follow. And what I've learned is that when the financial problem was solved and I did have a lot of money, it didn't make me feel any better about myself, because those external forms of validation, like we talked about earlier, is actually really hollow. And sometimes it's more confusing and therefore more frustrating when we have the external recognition and not the internal validation. So when I had a whole lot of money in my bank account and I still didn't feel the way I wanted to feel, that was confusing. And that then became irritating. And I mean, there were times openly where I was depressed and I've been suicidal, not too long ago. And I hate to even admit how recent some of that stuff was for me, but it was the expectations of having all the external boxes checked and none of the internal ones checked, or at least, one or a few of them that I was looking at and not really seeing all the validation that I had from my family or from other people, or that, the things that I was actually doing. So I was just out of alignment because I was deciding, this is what really matters and this doesn't. So where I'm at now is human success, in my opinion, is fulfillment. That's the main word that I think is most important. And I think sometimes we use the word fulfilling, but I don't think, first of all, I don't think we use it most of the time. But even when we use it, I don't think we fully understand the gravity of what fulfilling actually means. And you know that when I was 13 years old, I had this near-death experience where a car ran over me when I was riding my bike, and I'd pulled out in front of it, and it was going 50 miles an hour. And so I flipped over the car. By all accounts, I should have died that day. Like, there's no reason that I should have survived that accident. And because of that near-death experience, I imagined what the end of my life would be like, but not as a 13-year-old, like as a 90-year-old, right? Looking back on my life, what am I actually going to care about? And for whatever reason, call it divine wisdom or whatever you want to call it, I understood to at least a degree back then that what I will care about is not the things that I currently care about, right? I'm going to care about, did I actually live while I was alive? Did I do this thing to the best of my ability, this thing called life? Did I connect? At the time, I didn't understand being in love and having kids and all that stuff, but I just understood that there was something more meaningful to my life as I look back at it that I will care about. And I just started to live more and more and more according to those things that I think I'm going to care about. And here I am, 36 years later. That the anniversary of that accident was yesterday. It was December 17th, 1986. As we are recording this, and interesting, I didn't do anything. I didn't actually 2 days ago, today's the 19th, I recognize. 2 days ago, I didn't post on social media. Usually I go, okay, this is the anniversary of my death or my near death. And Facebook usually tells you, shows you all the past, like what you posted on this day and whatever. And for whatever reason, I don't know that I can even articulate, I just decided not to post anything this time. And just to kind of be with the day, and like, it's what the day is. My daughter came home from college that day for the break, and I just didn't feel the need for whatever reason. It was just kind of more of an internal thing. So going back to this idea of human success, I now believe that fulfillment is the ultimate box to check. And you don't need, I'm going to say anything. And I very rarely use universals because, universals are always wrong. But I don't think you need anything external for internal fulfillment. Now, if you want external things, there's nothing wrong with that either, right? I'm not making a universal statement either way. But internal fulfillment does not rely upon external recognition. Goes all the way back to the beginning of this conversation. And internal fulfillment also doesn't rely on external validation. So I think one of our missions here on this life, this is what really resonates with me personally, is one of our core missions is to be introduced to the real me, while I'm alive. That's what I want. I want to be introduced to myself. And unfortunately, the way most of us are programmed, we're not living authentic lives. We're protecting and we're pretending and we're projecting and all those things that we do. And so a lot of us don't actually know who we are. And I don't think I know who I am yet, but I've been doing this work for a long time. I know a lot more about myself than I did, right? And you can't know who you are without looking your shadows directly in the face. That's impossible. We all have shadows. We all have shame. We all have the things that we wish didn't happen in our lives. We all have programs that we wish weren't running. We all have tendencies. We all have addictions. We all have all those things because it's all part of the human experience. And until we accept and look at all those things and start to dissect, I don't think we can ever fully know us or even get close to knowing who we are. So I believe knowing who we are, being introduced to our core self underneath all of the patterns and all the programs and all the layers and all the pretend, getting introduced to ourselves is one of the, I'm not going to like put this on everybody, if people don't believe it or whatever, but I think that should be, if we want fulfillment, I think that should be one of our goals, is to be introduced to who we really are. Now, that's a scary process because it's vulnerable and there are emotions around that and there's unknown around that. But I believe most of us have dreams that we've pretended we don't have. I think most of us have skills that we don't know that we have. I think most of us have abilities that would blow our minds if we actually got to learn what we are capable of. And part of that is external stuff, what we're capable to create in the world. Part of it is internal stuff, the capacity to love, the capacity to feel. And so I believe that is the road toward fulfillment now in my life, at least. And that's where true joy lives. I think a lot of us are chasing happiness at the surface and we're sacrificing joy below the surface because we just want happiness. We just want excitement. We want the sexy stuff. We want the dopamine hits. But I don't think that leads to fulfillment. I don't think that leads to us looking back on our life and going, I lived while I was here. I took advantage of this human experience. And so one of the things that I've been saying lately is like just that word is so much more meaningful to me, human. And sometimes I'll put it into a verb. Somebody goes, how's life? And I go, yeah, I've been humaning. Yeah, that's what's happening with me right now. I'm humaning. Right?
I love that. I put that as my Instagram, human being. It's like, that's what I am, a human being.
Exactly.
I would take what you just said one level further by saying if people would be willing to do that, I think we would end up with a much better humanity in the way we see each other, because then we recognize who we are and how we're being in the world. I think that is really what's going to help us move forward. I know we're getting
100%.
close to the time. Do I have your permission to go over a few minutes?
You have my permission to do whatever you would like, especially on your podcast. Yes.
Thank you, Sean.
But I don't have anything like scheduled right away. And, these are the conversations I love to be in.
Because we talked about human success and you have just launched your book. Are you proud of me? The title by itself, honestly, Sean, just immediately spoke to me. And I know you're speaking in this book to the male, to the dad that is raising a child, whether it's a female figure or a male figure that's raising a child. I would love for you to talk about this and tell a little more about it, because I've only read a couple of chapters and scanned through it. And I know that this is material that I hope everyone out there is going to get a copy of it.
Oh, Rima, thank you so much. There's so much depth to this journey. And it's interesting, you mentioned the year 2014. That was the first draft of this book, was written in 2014. And it's gone through probably a total of 5 years on the back burner over the last 8 years. And then it's gone through 3 years of iterations and editing and rewriting and all of that. In 2014, I hadn't gone through all the stuff that I just shared with you, right? I hadn't gone through my one-man show, my looking at my shadows and, deciding I was going to be a lighthouse. So if I would have put out the 2014 version, I think it was still good. But once I had gone through a lot of these other experiences, then I had to rewrite this book from what I now knew it looks like, in terms of exploring our masculinity and who are we as dads and so forth. So in 2014, I finally wrote this book. I've been coaching women since 2006. And thousands of women over the years, primarily on entrepreneurship. And that always leads to fears and doubts and insecurities and rejection and all the things that most of us experience in our sabotaging. And as I just continue to do the deep work, it all just came down to self-esteem. We are afraid of rejection because of our self-esteem. We're afraid of not being approved of and the recognition, all the stuff that we talked about earlier. Those are all self-esteem issues. And the more that we are connected to our self-esteem, which is validation, internal validation, the less that the external stuff can scare us. So as I kept exploring self-esteem, I just kept recognizing that it always went back to the relationship with their father. And it doesn't have to be a bad relationship. It always starts there. And I would say that the majority of the women that were experiencing low self-esteem, it did start with their father. And so as I just kept getting into these conversations, a single phrase kept coming out of them, which is, as you said, now the title of the book, Daddy, are you proud of me? And it's because all of the conversations, almost all of them, just kept going down to, I don't know that my dad's proud of me. Yeah, my dad loves me. I don't know that he's proud of me. And a lot of times that's unconscious for the women also. Like they don't know that that's exactly what they're searching for in all the external validation or all their relationship sense or why they want to be successful or whatever. They're actually searching for their father's pride. This is not unique to fathers and daughters, but it's my journey because I coached women and my first child is a daughter. So as I was coaching all these women and having all these realizations, I was applying it to my relationship with my little girl. And one of the things that I did when she was really young, based on all the conversations I was having, is I would go into her room when she was asleep and I would just whisper in her ear, sweetheart, I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. I would just tell her I'm proud of you over and over and over and over again because of what I was learning from all of my coaching clients. And then I was telling my friend one time, somebody's got to write a book to dads. Because we don't know. We don't, this is not in our manual that doesn't exist. We don't know. And we didn't grow up as little girls. So we didn't have the same relationship with our dads as our daughters do. Somebody's got to write this book. And a friend of mine, I remember the kitchen of somebody else's house that we were both sitting in, and she was eating a carrot, if I remember. I think we were grazing on a vegetable tray. And she just like squared up to me and she goes, that's your book to write. And I just went, oh, I guess it is. And so that's when I decided, I was going to write this book. And it has gone through the iterations that I mentioned, but it's really a deep dive exploration of what our little girls, again, speaking directly to dads of daughters, what your little girls, the tagline is what daughters need to hear, see, and know from their dads. And we don't know that. We don't know what that is. But you said you read it.
I read bits and pieces and go, whoa.
Some of it, right. Yeah. So the other beautiful, and this was not in my plans, but the other beautiful thing about this book is it's kind of taken on a life of its own. Almost all of my clients through the years have been women. And so women that see this book is very intriguing because it sounds like you are asking your dad, Daddy, are you proud of me? Whereas men seeing the book, it sounds like your daughter's asking you, Daddy, are you proud of me? And so it has taken on this dual life where the majority of the readers so far are women. And there's so many women that say that, I mean, that healed my whole relationship with my dad. You know, one woman said, my entire relationship was healed without him knowing it. She didn't have conversations with him. She didn't ever share any of these concepts, but she said her entire relationship with her dad was healed just by reading that book. And I can say that with a level of conviction and certainty, because the other cool thing about this, Rima, is I don't feel like this is my content. I'm just reporting here. I'm just going, hey, dads, this is what thousands of women have told me. So there's nothing in this book that's theory. Zero. None of this book is my theory. It's, they told me this, and they told me this, and they told me this, they told me this, and don't do this and do this. And so I actually don't have I don't feel ownership over the content. I just feel ownership of the mission. Like I'm the vessel, but that's not my content. And I can feel that even as you say what you say, and I share some of the stories, like I'm not taking any of it as though it's my personal win, right? Like, yay, people like what Sean thinks. No, I just collected a bunch of information that, to your point, and I genuinely believe this, could heal, I mean, the entire world, right? Like it could heal what the majority of our issues really are. And I know that's a big, bold statement, but I firmly believe that it has to do with self-esteem, and it has to do with what we are carrying around as men. So the whole book is written directly to fathers of daughters. And I want it to have some urgency, but some leverage, right? Like, because a lot of men won't pick up a book that says something like, you know, let's look at your masculinity. But a lot of those men will pick up a book that says, your daughter needs this. And so my hope, my don't tell the men hope, is that they'll pick up this book for the sake of their daughter. And then once they're inside the book, I'm going to speak to them about masculinity. And then the really cool thing is the women that are reading the book, it's like they're listening to a coaching conversation with me and their dad. So they're seeing their father in these conversations, and they're seeing themselves in these conversations, even though I'm not directly talking to them, right? And even I think in the first chapter, I say, women, I'm not talking to you. Keep reading, but I won't directly address you beyond this paragraph, basically. But keep reading, but I'm talking to your dad now. And there's something kind of magical about how that has evolved. And it wasn't my intention. I didn't understand it at the time. But it's something that I'm really super proud of because of the gravity of the work. And the title itself, you know, it's a tearjerker sometimes to some people. Like I've shared the title and immediately, you know, some people have burst into tears. I mean, just saying the title. So it's piercing something in a lot of people, whether it's dads or whether it's daughters or whether it's, you know, people that don't fit into either one of those roles, because the concepts are human concepts. They're just put in the context of father-daughter relationship, because that's what I just wanted to speak to, that being the father of a daughter. And of course, that's my, you know, that's my daughter on the front cover as well as the back cover. So she is many years removed of that little girl with that little yellow hair braid, hair tie on the front there, but it's sacred work. And so thank you for asking about it. Thank you for letting me speak a little bit about it. You know, there's hours and hours that I could talk about it. But I do, you know, I want the message to get out there. I want the message of connection and vulnerability and controlling our emotions and self-esteem. And, you know, what does that lead to for ourselves as men, for our daughters, for our sons, for everybody? Like, this is a conversation, specifically self-esteem, that I don't think a lot of us have at the level that we need to have it. And that speaks to the internal validation that we've been talking about throughout this whole process. So hopefully the book is somewhat of a how-to, and there's a lot of tips for dads, like say this, don't say this, use these words, teach them this, and understand this, and show them that. There's a lot of tips. I mean, probably at least 100 tips. There's a section in the back of the book where I collected a lot of tips from our community, from dads who wanted to share some of the things they do with their daughters, and then from daughters who wanted to share some of the things their dads did with them. And then also from daughters who wish their dads would have done this, right? So the back of the book is like this sacred vault of like really cool tips for dads specifically. But I want it to help, and I want it to heal.
Sean, I think what's so delicious about what you're describing, what this book is about, is that it's real. It came from you speaking to a ton of women across the world, really, not just the United States, and hearing their real things that they go through, and then taking the information and utilizing it in a way that is going to make sense for people to begin to have better relationships with their daughter, to actually begin to heal. And it doesn't have to do with only having a young child, but even having a grown daughter or a grown woman that's a part of your house, to be able to go, here are the things that we need to work on. I think that's the part that I love, that you put it this way. This isn't, here's a couple of surveys and here's what I got as answers. These are real people. These are real women that spoke to you because that's how you developed this. And because it's so important for us to continue to heal. I don't know how to ask this. I guess I'll ask it this way. As we're going through this healing process, and as we continue to grow, what would you recommend to a young person that's beginning to launch their life? What is the key things that they ought to be concentrating on for themselves?
Trust the traveler. That has become a really important phrase, and has become more and more key in my world, with me personally, but also in all the things that we teach. And what I mean by trust the traveler is that most people are trying to trust the terrain. Most people are trying to trust the external surroundings, the other people. We're trying to get safety. We're trying to get a sense of confidence. We're trying to get all the things that we want to feel from a comfortable standpoint. Most of us are trying to find those things externally. So that's what I mean by trusting the terrain. Most people are trusting all the things outside of them. But when you trust the traveler, which is you, then the terrain doesn't matter, because you trust the traveler. And if you trust yourself, then you can walk or run or crawl on any kind of terrain, and you'll be safe. You'll be safe because you trust you, and you have you, right? One of the things that we talk about in our community is I got me. When I got me, you can't hurt me because I got me. But when I don't got me, not only can you hurt me, but you actually can't got me. Like, you can't actually fully protect me if I don't protect me. So to the younger generations, and anybody, I mean, everybody is, the oldest they've ever been, but also the youngest they'll ever be. So to all of you, you are the youngest you'll ever be from this point forward. And so from wherever you are, make it a point to know you, and as best you can, derive your trust and safety from you, your relationship to yourself. We talked about getting back up and in the ring. It's your relationship to yourself that will cause you to get back up and then get on the steps and then get back in the ring, and you get knocked down again and you get back up. That's a function of your relationship to yourself. And when you know that you will get back up, then and only then will you actually no longer be afraid of getting knocked down. Most of us are trying to avoid getting knocked down because deep down inside, we actually don't trust that we'll get back up. So, and the younger generations especially are phenomenal at this, right? Compared to some of our older generations, they're willing to take risks. They're willing to color outside the lines. They're willing to rewrite the rules. They're willing to break whatever seems like was left for them because they want to build their own thing. And that's such a powerful process of doing what you want to do and you ultimately being your own protector. And that doesn't mean you become sociopathic and not care about what other people think. It just means that no matter what happens, you got you. And when that connection is created, I don't think it's created as much as it's reclaimed, because we all have that. We might not feel like we have it just because we don't have access to it, but we all at some point in time, 100% believed in ourselves, trusted ourselves. We weren't afraid of falling down. We were trying to learn to walk. At what point in time did we decide that it was no longer safe to fall down? So we all had that relationship with ourselves at some point in time. I think personal development is about reclaiming it, recapturing it, removing whatever's in the way so that you can fall back into trust and love and connection with the traveler. And that is the ultimate liberation in life, I think.
Thank you. That's an incredible answer. And I hope they got all the nuggets out of it. What's the best way for the audience to connect with you, to stay in touch with you?
Yeah, well, my address is 4275. You're all welcome to come on by. Just bring gifts. Everywhere online, I am Coach Sean Smith. So that's my website.com. That's my YouTube channel, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere. Coach Sean Smith. Sean is SEAN. And I'm pretty easy to find. If you were to type that in, you'll see all my channels come up. And, I do what I can to answer questions and connect, whether it's people commenting on the posts or sending direct messages or whatever. I'm drawn to real people asking real questions. And that's what I think we need, to heal some of our divides and internally and all the things that we want. So please, if any of you have any questions, disagreements, anything from anything that you've heard here, reach out and let me know about it.
Sean, is there anything that you'd like to say that I have not asked you? Because I could talk to you for hours, but
I could talk to you as well for hours and hours. Anything? Well, can I read a poem?
Please do.
So there's a couple of poems that I've written that relate to some of the conversation pieces. Let me see what I'm intuitively drawn to. I'm going to search my poems here.
And just so you guys know, he's talking about being creative. He's now acting as well as coaching and doing poems, all the things so that, like he said, there's nothing left unsaid when the time comes. And that's really the message that Sean is telling you guys. Be yourself, show up, and really do the things that matter to you.
Well, based on what you just said, that kind of solidified the poem that I want to read. Thank you for all of that. Yeah, there's a lot that I've been doing, and I don't know that I actually fully connected these dots to the question that you asked earlier about human success, but I'm at a point now in my life where for the rest of my life, I just want to do the things that I care about. And I care so much less about almost everything because I care so much more about just a few things. And one of the things I care about is creating and getting it out of myself, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be something that everybody else likes or approves of. And that's actually the impetus of this poem. This poem I wrote based on an experience I had where I was in a group and we were practicing meditation. And I've always been a terrible meditator, in my opinion, because my mind wouldn't shut up. Like every time I would try to meditate, my mind would just stay loud or get louder. And I'd gotten to the point where I felt like I was doing it right, to where I could meditate and be relatively calm. And we were meditating as a group one day outside, and there was this bird that just kept chirping. And it really started to irritate me because it was messing up my meditation. And so I was like wanting the bird to shut up, and it kind of ruined this meditation. It was a 20-minute meditation. And then afterwards, our leader of the group said, if that bird had a message, because everybody heard the bird, it was loudly chirping. If that bird had a message for you, what would it be? And my immediate thought was that I don't like birds and I don't want to meditate outside. My immediate thoughts were just, surface level like that. But then as I started to think about it more, it became really profound. And I recognized that the bird didn't ask my permission to sing. So that was the impetus of this poem right here. What if I had the self-esteem of that old singing bird? What if I have a song to sing that's begging to be heard? What if all of my painful lessons were meant for somebody else's learning? What if just one of my shame's confessions would save somebody else who's burning? What if I sung my sacred song just like the old bird sings? And what if my deepest, darkest wounds are someone else's wings? At the end of my life, as I ponder my past, what will I really care about? What are you proud of, should somebody ask? What would I want to share about? The cars that I drove, the girls that I had, the zip codes of all my whereabouts, who I impressed, the boxes I checked, the numbers inside all my bank accounts. Interesting, isn't it, how so many of the things that we talked about, like literally in this poem, all of that will sound good to my ego, of course, but when my heart grabs the microphone, I know that the ultimate source of my pride will be speaking a different tone. Through the fog of deception and fear of rejection, the truth that can't get any clearer is that the only perception that'll matter to me is the one looking back from the mirror. My age will melt, my inner child will appear, and as I look down into his eyes, he'll have one simple question for me to answer. Did we live while we were alive? Did we feel the air in our face when we had the ability to run? Did we play when we could? Did we really truly have any fun? Did we help others? Did our light shine? Did we lift others while we continued our climb? Did you teach while you were learning? Did you chase what I was yearning? Did you keep building when life was crumbling you? Did you keep speaking when fear was mumbling you? Did you pay more attention to the doubts that were loud in you, or my whispers when I was saying that I'm proud of you? When I was feeling things, did you feel them with me? When I was healing things, did you heal them with me? When my tears welled up, did you let them out? When my fears swelled up, did you get them out? When my voice was speaking, did you listen for me? When my heart was dreaming, did you chase him for me? When your head refused it, did you still take the chance? When your soul heard the music, did you still choose to dance? Did you keep going when we got teary? Did you keep growing when we got weary? Did you ever let the world really get to know you? Did you feel all the love the world really had to show you? Did you remove all of our layers? Did you forgive all our betrayers? That's the only conversation that'll give me peace, my spirit fulfillment, and my soul release. So when it's time to reflect with that little child, I'll make sure both my heart and my face have a smile. Instead of avoiding the scary stuff, the things I was afraid of, I chose to call my ego's bluff to see what I was made of. I followed the path of growth and not the one of safety. I used all the gifts and talents that my creator gave me. I'll make sure that when I gaze through all the memories of my past, that my hands will be turning over and putting down an empty glass. That I sang my sacred song just like that old bird sings, because my deepest, darkest wounds are someone else's wings.
Drop the mic. Thank you. That does go deliciously with everything that we spoke of today.
Right? That's
The
not
magic
like
of the universe.
I didn't make that connection when I chose this. And then just like, oh, check, check, check. Fulfillment, boxes, like, oh my goodness. Sing your song. Thank you for creating the space, Rima, for me sharing that and just the whole conversation.
Thank you so much, Sean. I thoroughly appreciate you. And to our wonderful listeners, please remember that our attitudes always determine our altitude in life and what we become. Sean, thank you. Please follow us and please listen to the next podcast. Thank you.
Thank you,
And I
Rima.
love you.
Love you too.